Now, the next part, we're going to continue speaking with industry leaders. I'd like to invite up the Executive Leadership in AI panel. So Samuel Afesa, who is head of AI ML at Enterprise Innovation, at US Bank. Come on up. Osama, of course, will be the moderator. Gaia Balone from Prudential, Chief Data Scientist. Nenshad Bardi-Lawala, who is Chief Products Officer at Data Robot right here in Boston. Steve Johnson, the esteemed Steve Johnson, founder and CEO of Notable Systems. And of course, Vipin Mayer. Oh, he's here. I thought you were in remote. EVP, head of CKSI at Fidelity Investments. Thank you all. And Osama.
Thanks everyone, and welcome to our panel. Look, what can I say? You know, a startup like Notable Systems, one of the biggest insurance and asset management companies in the world, like Prudential, US Bank, Fidelity Investments, probably known to all of us because of most of our plans are on Fidelity, and Data Robot. Data Robot, when I first heard of them, they used to be a small startup. Now they are huge. And we'll be throwing some challenging questions to them about kind of automation in AI and how do they make it work, really, because the original theme was, hey, it'll work by itself, but they learned a lot through their experiences. So let me start. Actually, I'll start with Steve Johnson. Why is AI getting so much attention, in your opinion?
Well, let's see. First of all, people are talking about it a lot. And so I have a company, Notable Systems, that extracts data from documents. And one of the things I especially like about experiential AI is the idea of including humans in the loop and emphasizing that, to me, legitimizes AI systems that use humans. And so Notable Systems, when it got into the business of extracting data from documents, and it's a gigantic problem worldwide that's still largely being done manually, and it's because turning over the problem of extracting data from documents, understanding what means what on a page can't be completely automated. You need humans in the loop to map the meaning on the page, and then you can harness the machine's ability to do what it does best. I'm happy to say that machines haven't completely debilitated my ability to learn. I learned quite a bit from some of the talks we just had. Our guest of honor, Dave, saying that it's all about the data, but also you need humans at least in the loop at the design stage. And our Bose presentation, what we didn't hear from Bose was what we do at Bose is we press go. The long story we heard from Bose is a human story. Humans are still in the business of figuring out where AI should go. AI can't do that today. So there's a lot of hype about AI, but I think this new institute is going to ground it and remind us that tough problems that we're trying to solve can't just be automated. We need humans at many steps along the way.
Let me ask the same question of Gaia and then Vipin. Like, why do you think AI is getting so much attention?
Mostly for the opportunity that offers. I work in marketing or anyway in customer experience, and one thing that also the presentation from Bose was talking to us about is the opportunity to truly personalize. We moved the attention in the financial industry from product to people. Now, when we try to build the customer experience, it's not anymore in how I can sell a product, but it's more what I can do for my customers, what I can do for the consumers. A lot of what we do at Prudential is really try to make the consumer experience best as possible. from try to understand your needs, actually try to help you to understand your needs. Understanding financial needs is not easy. We saw often that financial crises come because people make wrong choices, because financial needs are hard to understand. I'm in the industry since forever, and still I don't quite know mine, if I had to tell you the truth. Keep discovering. They keep changing over time. And AI, what can help us to do, before we used to say, oh, I can be right 80% of the time, especially marketing was totally fine. Now, given that all of us are trying to get to personalized experience, understanding your needs, helping you to understand your needs, helping you to navigate, to educate you, and then try to identify the right solutions, not products, solutions, which are much more complex than product, that really can help you. You cannot be right 80% of the time. This is not just a marketing message and then you make the decision. You truly start to trust us. We become, and I'm sure my friend over there from Fidelity has the same idea, we all start to become financial advisors through our work. So we need to be extremely careful through the full journey in where we bring the consumer. And it should be focused on the consumer. Also, another opportunity that I think AI provide, at least in our industry, but in many of them, it's helping not just the front office kind of experience, but also the back office. Also, the back office start to become way more personalized. Pricing, underwriting, it becomes much faster. It's focused on the consumer and making sure that you're just asking the right amount of information, not all the information because we were used to it. So focus on really changing the experience top to bottom.
Vipin?
All right. Firstly, it's great to be here. I'm also a customer and have been recruiting talent from Northeastern for quite a few years.
Thank you.
So I'll give you 5 quick reasons. The first one everyone said is data. We are awash with data. The second reason is compute, but compute with a nuance. While we have infinite horizontal compute with the cloud, the hardware is getting very specialized to not only process computations, but also optimize for the algorithm. So for instance, the missing data issue, there are chips being manufactured that can optimize that algorithm. The metaverse, which is hopefully something we will experience in our lifetime, an alternative existence in a virtual world, all those algorithms are being optimized at the hardware level. The third thing I would say is algorithm is a commodity. You're not going to differentiate yourself with creating a new algorithm. That is, thankfully, in the arena of the Googles. And we should thank them every single time because they create the algorithm. We customize it to us. So the barrier for algorithms has gone down. Fourthly, I would say education. And this, you represent education. But education now is available at a fingertip. Not only that, I can spin up an environment within seconds. And the last thing I would say is use cases. Every single thing a human can do, I believe every task, AI can do much better at a task level.
Oh, that's a strong claim. Let me start with, actually, I'll shift over to Nenshad for a second with another question. How have you seen AI to be a game changer in industry sector you work with? And as a provider of AI technology, you work across many sectors, of course.
Yeah, thanks very much, Osama. So DataRobot is a company that's 10 years old. It was founded here in Boston by 2 data scientists who came out of Travelers Insurance, but also loved participating in Kaggle competitions. And they had a radical idea 10 years ago, which is that, and I think Dave said it beautifully, there are not enough data scientists in the world to operate the taxi, right? And it's very questionable whether we'll be able to grow enough people at the level of expertise that today's AI requires in order to be able to do that work. So the idea was, could we use automation? Could we take the thought processes that a data scientist uses and whether that's framing the problem, doing feature extraction, choosing models, and I agree with you, by the way, that the modeling portion has become much simpler, and then ultimately operationalizing and actually using those models. At this point in our life, we have about 1,000 customers at DataRobot. Those are folks, 8 out of the top 10 financial services institutions in the United States use our technology. Many of the largest retailers in the world use our technology, manufacturers, and so on. And what we found over those 1,000 customers that we've had is that number one, we've learned a lot. There is, in fact, when we talk about AI at DataRobot, we don't talk about artificial intelligence. We talk about augmented intelligence, which speaks directly to the experiential notion, right? It has to be a combination of human beings and the technology. And so what's allowed us to be successful, whether it's a bank being able to predict the currency transfer rates at a much higher level than they could with a rules-based system, because they're actually able to use the data to predict those. We have companies in Japan who are actually discovering new drugs using AI, right? So you can take that A, C, G, and T information and then recast it as a predictive algorithm. What we found is that the people side of the equation is really about framing the problem, helping people understand what AI can and cannot do today. Because there's a lot of hype, people have a lot of misset expectations that, if I just have data and I have an algorithm, magic will happen. But in many cases, it's about casting the data in a way that allows the algorithm to learn with the highest chance of being able to extract signal. And so being able to work with not only what we call as our customer-facing data scientists, human beings who have actually solved these problems before in these industries, and then tying it to the technology is what has allowed us to be able to get to 1,000 customers who are using AI in very interesting and frankly mission-critical ways for their organizations.
Sami, you head up advanced technology for US Bank, but you've also worked with some very large banks. In your experience, I'll ask you the same question. Share with us some game changer applications or events that AI enabled.
Yeah, thank you. So I work currently at US Bank, which is one of the largest financial institutions. And before that, I was in other places. So I think in general, in financial services, there are a number of areas that are being transformed or have the potential to be transformed using AI. Maybe to give a little bit of the land, there are 4 major areas. The first is the core team. As a financial institution, we want to get your business. So there's a lot of marketing, outreach, and that kind of stuff. So I think that area has been transformed really, really actively. So at the moment, there's no precision. Like your inboxes or your mailboxes, there's no personalization. So I think that's a huge area. One of the first things. And then once the customer potential says, yes, I'm interested, then that's the second gate of decisioning. Okay, now let me see if you qualify. And there's a huge black box there. Credit decisioning, using FICO scores, otherwise. So I think that part excludes a huge part of our society at the moment. So it's been transformed using data, advanced analytics, AI, alternative data, and so on. And we're actively working in that area as well. I think that the other one, the next is onboarding, KYC, onboarding, identity. I think that section, pretty much the back end side, it's also been transformed. And finally, it's the servicing. Once you're a customer, how do we service the needs? I think in that area, personalization, relationships. How do we engage with the customers, the clients in a meaningful way, retain them, delight the customers, all that things, I think, being also transformed using AI. So we're working actively at US Bank in a more practical level, as well as doing advanced research and development using AI.
Gaia, game changers, if you have examples of them, in both Prudential and in prior roles. I mean, you've had some amazing roles as well before.
Sure. Yes, at Prudential, as I was saying, we are really trying to identify where technology can help us. We are truly becoming, I think, a technology company. I've been, as you were saying, in previous companies before, and I was first at JP Morgan Chase and then at KeyBank. JP Morgan Chase especially invests so much in technology, but it's a huge company and takes some time, a lot of time to get everywhere with the technology effort. At Prudential, instead, there is a leap that we are truly doing from that point of view. We are trying to identify opportunities, true opportunities, where we can be game changers, not just through the customer experience, but also through our internal processes. Of course, fraud, it's a clear example how to manage claims, but also how internal processes through employment, how we can truly dig into the data and try to understand how to better work with our employees, leveraging the new technology. Understanding the voice of the customer. Understanding the voice of the customer is going to improve the customer experience, but is also first is going to inform internally which kind of processes we need to change. Before I was talking about, of course, what we can do from a front-end perspective and how we can help our customers and educate our customers and consumer in general to identify their needs. So it's truly, I think, at Prudential, there are so many opportunities that we are exploring, and we are truly looking forward. We know the principles that we spoke about before, what ethical AI should mean, and what we should look at for making sure that we are doing the things in the right way, but also we are trying to understand the execution of it. Principles are great, but unless we can execute on it, it's going to be quite hard to really pass the limitation that regulators are starting to talk to us about, or pass the limitation that the legal and compliance department are talking to us about.
And by the way, if you have questions in the audience, raise your hand at some point, and we'll have a mic come around and collect questions or have you offer them. Let me switch over to Steve for a second. You've had quite the interesting journey from your first startup being acquired by AOL, and then going into the recommendations space with Bayesian recommendations, and now going into handwriting. Anything what have you learned about AI through that varied journey?
As you know, I've always had a quibble with the term artificial intelligence for the reason I alluded to a few minutes ago. So much of what we think is intelligent is actually in the design, in the human element. Artificial intelligence is nowhere near smart enough to know where to go yet. And so in each of these cases, an image compression algorithm in the 90s, figuring out there was a problem, 2,400 bits per second, couldn't support a picture being transmitted. You need to make the picture representation smaller. Recommendations, any good recommendation system, if it's not just using collaborative filtering, needs to have a person decide how preferences work in this domain, how the structure of the content works, what taxonomy of attributes are the best instruments for prediction. And then in the company that I'm in now, what means what on a page? Machines aren't anywhere near smart enough to figure that out yet. But once you get a simple way of mapping that meaning, then you can really harness the power of machines. And by the way, on the other question, where the big breakthroughs are today with AI, not to be an ongoing commercial message for your institute, Osama, but the artful joining of humans and getting people used to this idea, I think investors are still kind of averse to the idea of humans getting involved with the software. It's supposed to be automated, but the artful combination enables us to solve really tough problems, so allows artificial intelligence to get into games that it's not in yet by combining the two.
Vipin, there's a lot of hype on AI and a lot of noise. How do you, and I'm going to ask this question of a few others, how do you separate the hype from reality?
All right, so AI, I believe, is at the top of the hype curve, Gartner's hype curve, which means the expectations from AI far exceed any of the 35 technologies that exist. Now, I'm a believer in AI, and I made a provocative statement early on, and I should just say, in partnership with humans. Okay. That said, AI can do a lot today. It can read for me. It can write for me. It can speak for me. It can see for me. It can create for me music, videos. It can diagnose conditions for me. And I can go on and list a lot of items. All those are very specific task levels with data, with me in the loop. Okay. Now, what is hype? Hype, I think, is in 3 areas. The first area is what is called common sense. AI doesn't have common sense. It's not even an infant. For example, if I said, I went to Capital Grill, I ordered a steak, and I left a big tip. And if you ask AI, what did I eat? Unless you program a rule, it will not know what I ate, while a child would. So common sense is missing, but common sense is coming. But how is common sense coming? It's coming through rules. There'll be billions of rules that will come into place, but that doesn't exist today. Rules would just replace common sense. The second thing that is hype is that AI cannot adjust with data changes, and you have to govern it, which we've talked about. The fact that you can have AI and leave it alone, no, you cannot leave it alone. You have to monitor and govern it like nothing else. Huge, huge issue. The third issue, and I'll stop at the third one, is AI doesn't know between moral and immoral pathways. It can optimize for the objective function you specify, which gets to an education point. You can actually do a lot of harm, and there's enough people believing that there will be some very significant issues created by AI just because people don't understand all that it can do in certain conditions. So all that is hyped if you think you can just leave it alone, but at a task level, with you in the loop, I think it is incredible.
Nanshad, what's your answer to that question? How do you separate hype? And I'm sure you deal with a lot of hype.
We do deal with a lot of hype. I think it's a problem for the ages. One of the things that has helped us is actually working through real concrete problems. There are a lot of problems that are actually not well suited to AI today, right? So when you're working with a company, again, if we're working with a bank or a retailer, et cetera, a customer might say, we want to solve a specific problem. You gave some great examples earlier. We want to be able to read handwriting and automatically make decisions or inferences based on that. That might not be based on the current state of the technology, just because Google has, and they did actually yesterday or 2 days ago, came out with a remarkable 540 billion parameter language model that can actually answer some questions without rules. That's shocking. But the more down to earth problems like customer churn, know your customer, demand forecasting, et cetera, we have found that having gone through the experience of both successes and failures, right? I have to admit, it's not every project our company has done has been successful, but you learn and you build up a body of knowledge of what can be done repeatably and what cannot be done repeatably. And so the number one thing, when I think of how do you inoculate against hype, it's about expectation setting. Right? What have we been able to achieve in these different industries and these different use cases? And what are the things that we don't have empirical evidence that it can be solved in a reliable, repeatable way using AI? And so I think there are many common use cases that, and at least in the business world, which is primarily where we operate, where we've developed a good body of knowledge. But there are also many use cases where we have to raise our hands and say, you know what, we've never done this before, so we can't guarantee that you'll get a good outcome, that you'll save $100 million in costs, or you'll increase your revenue by $100 million, because we have not figured out the right way to translate the business problem using the data into constructs that AI can use.
So you would actually tell a customer, potentially, our software will not do this?
Absolutely. we would do that because in the software industry we've transitioned to it's no longer about sell once and then run away, right? The world is now a subscription. So if I tell you it works and then it doesn't work, you're not going to renew the next year.
Yep. Sami, same question to you. How do you separate hype from reality in your world?
I think to add to what my colleague said, the hype is coming from the great media grabbing at headlines, flying cars, self-driving cars. In our business, in financial services, I think the reality is much different. The struggle with data, platforms, regulations. You cannot just deploy this great model without being able to explain it. So it's impossible, right? So I think the key thing for us is expectation management. The hype is either the business leader thinks AI can do everything, or they don't trust it at all. They're very happy with the 1,000-soldier army folks doing the stuff manually. So I think for us, finding the middle ground is the key, and educating a huge amount, but also making sure, like mentioned earlier, we have the framework, the responsible AI framework in place. So we say, we are doing this the right way, and involve all stakeholders in the business, from the risk, compliance, legal, all the way up to the government regulators. So that's how we are addressing it. And education is a key part of that. And I think in financial services, there are so many things that when it comes to the ground, that matter than the big headlines.
So I'll throw a couple of, one dangerous question and one open question. Any of you care to share an example of, or examples of bad expectations leading to disappointing outcomes, and how did you deal with them? That's question number one. Question number two is, what do you look for from higher ed? What do you want us to be doing that's going to produce things relevant to you? So I don't know, whoever wants to jump on the first one.
I'll go ahead.
Right.
I'll compromise, actually. Bad expectations leading to good outcome. And this is kind of more on the hype issue. It does cause some interference with customers, with investors, even legislators that kind of expect AI to be happening in the future, and so you don't have to get around to regulating anything just yet. But with customers, they're so intrigued by AI that they think it's magic, and so when you talk to a customer, we just closed a customer that gets 20 million pages of faxes a year, and they've got a legion of people transferring information from those pages, all kinds of pages, including Chinese menus, culling the information from the chaff. And for 10 years, the CIO has been looking for the magic, something that could automate the process of finding the information on those pages and getting it into their order entry system. And we came along. We had a tough hill to climb to say, no, we're not going to do this automatically, but we can put technology in place to make your human data entry people 80% more efficient. And then the system will learn from their interaction with our guesses at what the data is to get better and better. And so your humans can be phased out, can be made more productive or phased out and put to more challenging work. So that's the kind of challenge I think that still exists, especially in my world, expecting magic and waiting for it instead of jumping in with a hybrid solution.
Any other takers to the question?
Go
ahead.
I'll take it. So what's really interesting is that because we're very focused on the data science aspects, right? And it's fascinating to work with new algorithmic techniques to work with data. People don't realize, and we saw this when the pandemic first hit in March of 2020, that today's model is outdated tomorrow. And so what we're repeatedly seeing is customers who have for many years been retraining their models only every 3 months or every 6 months because the world wasn't changing very often. And what they found post-pandemic is that, wow, our predictions are starting to go stale much more quickly than ever happened before. And so what we've had to do in response, right, and we've learned too as part of this process, is to build in workflows for continual retraining. We have to constantly search for new models with new data and new techniques to be able to ensure the customer has a certain level of fidelity with the, no pun intended, fidelity with the predictions that are being generated. So for us, what we found is that this notion that AI is static, right? You build a model and you deploy it and you get these predictions and all is good is completely false. A model is a snapshot of a representation of reality at a given point in time. And when you think of AI at a production level, it really needs to be a continuous process of automation in order for you to actually get the value, because as the world changes, and therefore the subsequent data that reflects reality changes, your modeling needs to change as well.
With the top leadership of the university here, I'm going to insist that you answer the last question, each of you with your own view.
Okay.
What do you look for from higher ed?
Okay.
And be selfish. Tell us what we're doing wrong, what could we be doing better, what is missing?
Okay, so let me begin. Firstly, acknowledging an outstanding partnership we have with Northeastern. And we have a couple of hundred data scientists within my team. The need for PhDs is there, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about two things that I think are the biggest velocity enabler in our use cases. The first one, it's been mentioned here, the knowledge of AI for those leaders who are driving use cases is not up to par in the industry. There are many areas where this needs to be shored up. Right from how do you identify a use case? What is a success metric? How do you experiment for this before you go live? How do you understand a black box? It's a black box as you get into deep learning. You don't understand cause and effect. How do you govern it? That point has been made. How do you understand ethical considerations? We need thousands of people educated in this area. The intersection of design and AI, I haven't seen a program in that space anywhere up to the robustness we need. Design principles, because we are talking about experiential AI, which means you need to understand human-centric design. And design right now is done by agencies who don't understand AI. Okay, so that's the first arena. I think it is ripe with opportunities for thousands and thousands of people to be educated. The second area I would say is the governance. And the governance is a shared responsibility across the scientist and the business community. And the example you just gave, the level of governance you need is not in the industry at this stage. The kind of monitoring you need to do and how you educate every single person who goes through the AI program on governance, I would say, just so that we don't do something bad on a smaller scale or a bigger scale, I think is huge for education to step up to.
Okay, in the last few, thank you for a comprehensive answer, actually. And that's a good list for us to take notes from. Each of you for that question, like what is your ask of this audience, of us, in the world of AI? So who wants to go next? Steve?
Well, you could probably expect what I'm going to say, which is you're doing it. Removing the mystique of artificial intelligence so it's not seen as something like magic. Teaching that it's up to we humans, the students here, to learn how to find human problems that need to be solved and then creative ways of harnessing technology to solve them. Think of it more as advancing intelligence instead of artificial intelligence.
And Chad?
I'd love to see a program that combines data science with the MBA, because that way we would have very practical education where people could learn how do you use AI to forecast your business plan? How do you use AI to predict which customers you want to offer personalization to? I think there's a tremendous opportunity to combine the business knowledge in a university like Northeastern with the AI experience to create a new generation of people who are the next generation of analysts who will use AI to drive business outcomes forward.
Have you been using AI to snoop on my conversations with the business school here?
I have not.
We're exactly thinking about those areas. Gaia, please.
Sure. So from our side, it would be actually twofold, probably similar to everybody else. On one side, we are looking for data scientists that actually can help us to continue grow our capabilities to support our processes, consumers, users.
How
And
many data scientists do you need?
A lot.
I mean, Vipin mentioned 200 to 300 he has already.
Well, I think right now we have about 70 positions open.
Wow.
Yes. And also what we are looking for is partnership in helping us to educate the business and all our other partners to really understand AI, don't be scared of it, and help us to build a framework to use it properly and safely.
Sami, you got the last word?
Yeah, I think everything has been said, but I would say the experience part, having a time spent with us, get a really good experience of how messy real life is. It's not just Kaggle competitions. There's a lot more to real data. But for me, specifically, I'm looking for scientists, researchers. So I think at the PhD postdoc level as well. And I think I like what the president said earlier, encouraging your faculty, your advanced researchers to go spend time in industry, I think is really super critical. It used to be the case when I moved from academia, there was a huge stigma, it's like, oh, you went to dark side. But I think that's not the case at all. There's a lot of experience, to be back and forth. So, yeah.
With this, I would like to conclude. Were there questions that we needed to take from the audience? I'm looking to the team here. Given the time, I want to conclude by thanking you. Thank you for coming in and sharing your views from your industries. Thank you for your partnership. And please enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.